I'm going to introduce Pastor Roger. Roger, would you give us a little background on when you as a senior pastor is also working with people in care groups and care ministries?
Well, I've been a senior pastor, or a pastor for, I guess, 35, 36 years, something like that, despite my youthful appearance, Jake. And
he started when he was 4.
Similar haircuts that we've both enjoyed over the last couple of years. And my life intersects all kinds of things for which I was really totally unprepared, but that's part of pastoring, is that you are hurled into things that there really is no book about it. You know, of course we have the Bible, but there are all kinds of life experiences that I have been thrown into, and many of them have involved cancer, and I've seen it with friends, walked that journey with many friends, families and their children, many, many times. Some of them very dear, close friends, friends of my daughters, and we've walked through that as a family and as a brother to another man, and as a pastor to their family and their extended family. Most recently here in this church, we've walked through the cancer of one of our staff members, our pastor of worship, Tim Vandervelde. And we watched that very closely and personally. So those kinds of experiences, and they go on. I mean, at any given time, there are probably, I don't know how many, what the number would be, probably 50 to 100 people immediately impacted by cancer in our church. By that I mean they're a caregiver, or they are a survivor, or they're concerned about it, they're waiting a diagnosis, they have a family member somewhere who's wrestling with it. So it's all around me all the time.
When we bring up the topic of death and dying, it's usually one of those topics that's an awkward conversation. Mm-hmm. But we know it's going to happen sooner or later, and you know, the topic that we were talking about, or our title, is Dying Well. Mm. Is that even possible?
Well, I've never done it, so I can't really give you a lot of coaching. But no, it was Napoleon who said these words. He said, "The sentence of death wonderfully concentrates the mind." I think there were 2 times in his life when he was given a death sentence, and by a court, and that is very true. It wonderfully concentrates the mind. Is it even possible to die well? When I think about dying, I would like to die like Enoch in the Old Testament. The Bible says he walked with God and then he was no more. You know, instantaneously just gone. There was no process with him. Or Noah, or Methuselah, or one of those old patriarchs. Those guys lived to be like 950 years old, and you think, well, you know, it's got to be possible with that length of time behind you and all the time to consider life. It's got to be possible to have cleared everything up, straightened everything out, gotten your IRA well packaged after 900 years, and to left everything in order. You know, we'd like to maybe die at a ripe old age, or feel like that we've lived out our capacity on the earth. Or I think about Stephen, who's a character in the New Testament, who was one of the earlier followers of Jesus, and he met his death as a martyr. He was stoned to death, and yet it says while he was being stoned, he looked and he saw a vision of heaven. And the image there in the book of Acts in the New Testament is that Stephen died on earth, but his vision and really his existence, even before his physical death, was in heaven. One more example from the Bible, since I want to respect all the faiths that might be in the room, but obviously I'm speaking from the perspective of a Protestant, evangelical pastor, and I have a biblical or a Christian worldview on these things, which I'd be glad to discuss with any of you at any time, but that's the well from which I'm speaking. So you know where I'm coming from. You can either welcome that or you can guard yourself from it. But the other person, obviously, in the Bible who died well is Jesus. And the reason for that is because at the very worst part, even of his suffering, he knew that he had done everything he was assigned to do. So as you know, his famous words on the cross were, "It is finished." if I could die and know that I've accomplished everything my life was intended to accomplish, then I think I would have died well. But let me give you a more contemporary example. I was pastoring in Colorado some years ago, and a woman in our church was diagnosed with cancer, and Ginger was a fireball leader in our church, a major player in all the ministries of the church, raised her family in this church, and she was at that time in her mid-40s, really at the prime of her life, with a couple of young teenagers, 13 to 15 years old. And she contracted cancer, and she fought it with all the energy that many of you are fighting that with. And this went on for many years, and she fought it to remission, and then it returned, and she fought it to remission again. I can't recall the details of the particular malady that she was struggling with, but she was one of these faith-filled people who marshaled the church to pray for her, and she was a woman of faith and a woman of great courage, and she kind of led us in this journey of faith. But the third time around with her bout of cancer, and this was about 5 or 6 years into her battle, her body was losing the battle, and finally she went to a hospice. And I was called by her husband at 2 in the morning to go see her because she was so upset and so concerned. And I went to Ginger, who at this point was, very thin and very sick. And I was talking with her, and as I talked with her, I realized inside of her was this fighter, this warrior, this woman of faith who had made so many claims and so many requests of God. And I just felt led to share with her. I said, Ginger, there comes a point where the greatest step of faith is to trust what God has promised you, and that is that He's there for you, and He'll receive you and take you into His presence. I said, you're not abandoning us or your family. You're not abandoning the faith if you release yourself. You're not giving up your belief. You're actually grasping your belief. And she was so weak she couldn't really even speak to me, but I prayed with her and held her hand and stayed for a while, and then I went home. This was still like early in the morning, 3 or 4 in the morning. And I got a call at 5 o'clock from her husband saying that Ginger had called him, she had talked with him, and she said, I'm at peace. And minutes later, she passed away. Her life on this earth ended. Now, that whole story may not sound very peaceful, but it was peaceful, and it ended well in the end, because she recognized what she had believed all her life. She really could trust. And death is one of those things that is the most powerful and most accessible fear in our life. It's what sells movies. It's what sells NCIS and all these crime scene things, because death is such a tangible, accessible fear for all of us that we wrestle with what that is, and we make a spectacle of it, and we sell it all the time. But when it's me, what do I do with that?